Hey, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar on the ins and outs of distance learning. My name is Will Patterson, and I've officially switched my measurement of time from months to the length of my beard. So we do a lot of webinars here at Securely, and I think this is maybe our third one that we've done with Google, and I just love the audience. Everyone that works at Google, and honestly, everybody in this K-12 education space. We all love to learn, share ideas, and especially when we're all, for the most part, remote ourselves, kind of like me and Roger today, webinars are helping fill in that gap that, local meetups and conferences previously filled. So, yeah, so kind of in that, I wanted to quickly start off by doing a little bit of housekeeping. First off, this webinar is being recorded, so that means if for whatever reason you have to hop out, don't sweat it. You'll get a link to this recording shortly after the webinar concludes. And then also, of course, if you really enjoyed this presentation, feel free to share it out. The same link you used to get in today can be used at any time to view the recording. So yeah, and then there's also, as this slide shows, there's plenty of ways you can engage with us. As you see here, there's ways you can actually speak to us directly. We have a Q&A widget, of course, that's already open. I'll highlight that really quick. If you have any questions at all, we'll have a Q&A section at the very end. So we'd love to answer questions if you got them. And then, of course, another fun one that we're doing, we've done recently in some of our new webinars has been our group chat. So there's a few hundred of you on today's webinar, so feel free to go in there, say hey, let us know where you're from. And also, if you just want to shoot questions out that other people that are attending today can kind of engage with as well, put them in there, because we'd love to kind of keep this conversation going. So what can you expect from today's presentation? Well, we're going to speak quickly on what we've seen at a macro level, as a service provider in the space, that shift to distance learning. We have a unique perspective. We'll talk about how schools are positioned to provide new levels of student safety and also the parental engagement, while remote. And then finally, we're going to have some live demonstrations. That'll actually be the bulk of today's webinar. We'll be speaking to just some of the real-world experiences that both myself and Roger have found important while managing remote distance learning initiatives through Google. I'm trying to think if I've forgotten anything else. Oh, there's some resources directly below where I'm at. We'll be speaking to some of them, but we have some guides, like some PDFs, other webinars, just quick links for things that we'll be talking about. So feel free to click on anything like that you want to learn more about. So, so speaking of Roger, I'm glad to have him with us today because he's one of he's one of my go-to guys when it comes to just about anything Google. I put his blog in the resources section. Roger, like many of you, is a full-time teacher and responsible for many of other things, right? Roger's been leading many of the remote learning initiatives needed by the 24 schools that he helps overseas, and does it with the help of the partnership he's built with both Google and us, Securely. And also you have me. My name is Will Patterson. I work obviously with Securely. I began as an engineer, and I went on to deploy just about all of our cloud-based solutions, but moved more into the customer experience advocacy side of the house over the last few years. And both Roger and myself are fairly technical. So again, feel free to send any matter of questions you might have regardless. Roger's used to speaking to teachers. I'm used to speaking to just about anybody. So yeah, with that, this should be pretty fun. And I also realize that many of you might not know who we are. You definitely know and trust Google. That's probably how many of you found this webinar. But if you haven't heard about us, we're Securely, a 100% cloud-based student safety solution. We're in a little over 15,000 schools. We help keep somewhere close to 10 million students safe. And we're also empowering over almost 2 million parents now. More on that later, but this past year, we have a 24/7 monitoring team, and we've hit some pretty key milestones this year specifically. They celebrated their 1,000th lives saved. So kudos to them. We have a lot of really awesome tools. We'll show off some of them today, but really we'll focus more on like that partnership with Google. We provide, unique remote and distance education tools that work directly with Google, like our robust filter that looks at web traffic as well as many of the Google services that you use today. And then also a classroom product, which allows teachers to view screens, push lessons or virtual meetings like Google Meet, and speak in real time with students. And I'll show a little bit of that as well too. But I want to start with a quick poll, just to kind of get a finger on the sort of like the pulse of where everybody on this, or at least that's attending right now, is. I'm just curious, if you might not know the answer to this, but how is your school choosing to open this fall? We're curious if it's you're going more or less full remote, if there's going to be some hybrid learning going on, where maybe one day your students are coming in school, or are there, and then there will be virtual after that, or if it's going to be full in school right from the start. I'm just curious because this kind of help us, especially when we're speaking. But I think that helps add some perspective there. So if you got a second, feel free to just let us know what it's going to look like for you guys. So, well, perfect. We got a lot of people that responded. I'll share the results here in a little bit. It looks like a good amount of you are going full remote. But yeah, we'll show the full results here in a little bit. But so being where we are in the network stack allows us to see some interesting trends at macro levels, like I said before. And that shift to distance learning has been no different in just being able to see those kind of trends. So, that shift, as we all know, earlier back in March, wasn't necessarily easy for many schools. A lot of you weren't even ready to send devices home, or quite yet, and maybe not even in that case now. But as you know, for many reasons that could be the case. IT admins were stuck having to figure out how to keep students safe on devices that were outside of the school, where you don't have as much control. And then you're also, as an IT admin, you're wondering, how do I train my educators and my staff and ensure that they're only using school-approved tools like your Google Suite, if they weren't using that before. I've spoken with Roger in previous webinars, and that's been probably one of the things that he's worked on, is just making sure that the teachers that weren't using Google previously, they are certainly using it now. So teachers and school leadership, they're struggling with, and probably the biggest thing now is, especially since you're not in front of those kids, is how do you keep students engaged, and how are parents going to be in the know and help teachers, especially, and keeping those kids engaged. Goodness, and it's so hard when you're a parent and you're also working remote like all of us. So how do you do that? And then also from Securely's point of view, as you can see from like the little graph that we have here, our engineers were working overtime, and in many cases during the weekend, pretty much just getting everything set up for all the schools. Back in March, we saw, I think, almost a 3x rush on deployments that were happening just from the month prior. And we also, from our engineering side, were building brand new features and things that basically just answered a lot of the needs that schools had in this new normal, right? So almost overnight, of course, the use of Google services more than doubled. We help schools keep track and monitor Google Docs, Drive, email, and we're looking specifically for self-harm, cyberbullying, and violence. But because we are, in the middle, right, and we're seeing that, we're able to see how much traffic they're building, and in this case, like, it's an insane amount of traffic. Collaboration tools like email and especially Google Docs, were rightfully being used, to those, greater capacities, because that's where all your students, that's where most of the learning was taking place. And being that we do look specifically at those troubling parts, we notice a significant shift in just how students use that technology, whether it's just more, they're using it for much longer during the day. Like that screen time is a true metric that parents especially are interested in learning. But in these graphs, where we're seeing flagged activity happen during the day changed from predominantly during the school day to post-March, almost completely after hours and during weekends. I don't have a graph for it, but one of the more endearing metrics I found was actually from the educator, like the teacher, on our classroom product. Like I mentioned before, that the average daily use of a teacher went from where they're active like about 4 days a week to a little over 6 days a week where teachers in our product at least once. And what that means is, we were seeing teachers, working on weekends, whether it was providing office hours or virtual meetings. So, working around even student schedules. So your teachers love these tools because it gives them that ability. We're going to go and show you a bunch of those great best practices that you can use with Google here in a moment. I wanted to highlight before we go into Google just some of the things that we've recently added into our products that address a lot of those concerns, like where students are on their devices much longer, what this looks like for parents, what this looks like for teachers, because student safety and parental engagement might not be the first thing you as an educator or an admin might be thinking about when it comes to distance learning. But it's so incredibly important, now more than ever, because your students are dealing with a lot of the same pressures that you, parents are, not being able to see their friends, human interaction, the lack of one-to-one education. We won't really know the effects until a little bit more time passes. So it's important to keep those things in mind. Especially if you're the boat where you might not have this insight today, like what's your students' mental health like, even at a macro level. And luckily, Google and Securely kind of make this easy to address. We've been partners with Google since the beginning. We can deploy our solutions, every single one of our solutions actually, through Google, including filtering. We filter all of your devices, no matter if it's Windows, Chrome, Mac, iOS, anywhere, any browser. Being that we're 100% cloud-based, you don't have to worry about sending the traffic back to your school, so you don't have to turn yourself into an ISP. I know that's one of the challenges that a lot of schools are struggling with. But students and staff both are automatically authenticated with our products, so it's easy for the end user. And you as educators and leaders see what students are searching for. You can manage YouTube, and you have the visibility into anything that may be related to self-harm or cyberbullying or violence on any of these Google services. So, and then also, also through Google, your teachers now have brand new tools. One of our solutions, Securely Classroom, gives them the ability to see the screens remote, manage those tabs, push lesson plans, or what we've seen here recently is pushing like webinar or like meeting links, and then ways so that teachers have one-on-one ways of engaging directly with their students. These tools are extremely powerful and allow you to get some of that one-to-one learning back. And the other big thing that we've added, especially here over the summer, has been for parents. Our home solution that over almost 2 million parents currently use today, the biggest challenges faced by parents were just having the visibility and management of what their children were doing during the school day, which is hard when you're working from home. But we help solve that by giving them push notifications, that lets them know when something's happening, as it happens. We give them real-time reporting, the ability to schedule when bedtime is, so that that kid can't, be surfing the internet until all hours of the evening. They can also pause the internet and treat different children at that house completely different. I know Roger's going to speak a little bit to his experience with that and how he's been able to push that en masse. But those are just some of the big things that we've added to our portfolio over the summer that I think really speak to the time that we're in right now. So if you're not doing any of this today, you can sign up and use a lot of these services. Try them out right now. Just let us know. We're happy to help. But let's talk more, let's pivot now to what you can do inside of Google to kind of help lock things down, keep your kids safe and your devices safe and your infrastructure safe. And especially being formerly before working at Securely, being a sysadmin, a network engineer, when you compare how different MDMs and even Windows Active Directory you have to use and build to manage and maintain user and device settings, Google makes it so incredibly easy, which is I'm probably speaking to the choir, right? But we're going to look at some device level settings, user settings, app and extension settings that you may already know about, but some of you might not. When I was a sales engineer, I thought that a lot of these things were super common, but in a lot of cases they aren't. Some schools don't even know that Google gives data loss protection tools that can block and make sure that people that are trying to share credit card information and social security numbers, they can help you manage that, right? You don't have to buy crazy expensive tools to help you lock down your environment. But some of the things that we'll go over and show are in these bullet points. I'm going to share my screen here in a moment. But it's also worth note that we also have a nice handy PDF that Google Admin and Chromebook Best Practice Guide right here. Click on that, download it. It has all of this in detail, completely spelled out. So feel free to download that. Doesn't cost a thing. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen. This will take a second to go. And while this is maybe loading. It's not loading for me. I apologize. I'm not able to share my screen. Roger, let me have you share your screen and go into some of the things that you do inside of your Google Admin Console to keep kids safe, especially when it comes to maybe email protection.
Okay, let's do that then. Hopefully my screen's going to be sharing.
Right.
The app claims it's sharing its screen, so...
Yep.
Oh, I think we're going.
You're good. Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so what I'm going to do is jump onto this sample G Suite domain that Securely has given me to play with. And, there's lots of things wrong here. So I'm going to show you how to sort of fix them, because one of the issues that you might come across with lots of people using accounts all of the time, all over the place, is that they'll be using them on all sorts of devices. And it's all too easy for things to go a little bit pear-shaped if you're not careful. So let's start with mail. And if you've never seen the admin console before, welcome to the admin console. Somebody asked in one of the questions, how do you ask for support? Well, in the admin console, there's a support thingy here, a question mark. And you click on that, and you can either go into a chat with somebody at Google, or you can phone them up. And they're generally really very helpful and answer pretty quickly any time of day. Anyways, the best way I find to navigate the admin console, by the way, is this burger menu up in the top here, rather than clicking and drilling through all these icons. So let's just jump into Mail. because that's kind of a core service and an easy place for things to go wrong. And there's a few things in here to set up just to make sure things are working properly. Some of them are slightly techy, but I'll just point them out just in case you haven't got them. First one is authenticated email here. And this domain hasn't got email authentication. If you don't have email authentication, basically anybody can pretend to be you and get away with it. So what you need to do is, in whoever's hosting your domain somewhere, so whatever you're called, .org or whatever, then you need to put some DNS records in there. You can click on generate a record, and this record here needs to go into your domain hosting. There's a couple of others that need to go in there as well, something called an SPF record and a DMARC record. And I'll point these out on my blog if you don't know anything about this, but this means that it's very hard for somebody to pretend to be you. So that's one thing I would point out. It's kind of an essential, but I still see people sending unauthenticated emails around the place. So we go back into Gmail settings. A couple other ones. If I jump into safety first of all, which is an excellent name for it. There's some settings on here that everybody should have enabled, and you can see on this test domain, you can see a number of offs on here. Google has some great tools that will use that AI back engine to figure out, well, okay, that's a malicious email or not. So this stuff about spoofing on authentication, basically, I'm not going to go through all of these. You want to click on the little button there, and you want to turn these on, okay? And there's various options about what might happen if one of these messages is flagged up. But again, I won't go into the details. You can read the Google documentation, but turn on the basic protection, which is built in. We want to do that one as well. And there's a couple of here. And we would turn on these protections. And the defaults are pretty good defaults. And that will, there's an awful lot of rubbish comes out from different email servers across the world. If you turn on those and turn on email authentication, then you're kind of doing all your users a big favor. A couple other things quickly in Mail. There's a bit called Advanced Settings down here. And Advanced Settings allows you to do some, well, advanced things. Not really advanced, but just fairly straightforward. Nice thing about the Google Admin Console, when you click on things, it basically does what it says it does. So this is your structure here down the side. So these are kind of like folders for devices or people. So we've got some here for students and teachers, and I can apply policy based on a particular group of people, or OU as it's called. It's an organizational unit. A couple of things. Spam. Everybody loves a bit of spam. So if I click on the spam settings, I never leave the default settings as the default settings. And the first one I get rid of is bypass spam filters for messages received from internal senders. I have no idea why they've got that checked by default. But if one of your accounts gets compromised and starts sending out junk, then if you've got that button ticked, then your users are going to get it, okay? So I would always untick that and then put spam into admin quarantine. Don't let it go to your end users. Our users, all 17,000 of them, or whatever, never have anything in their spam folder unless they explicitly mark something as spam. So it says put into admin quarantine. And then this has only got one. You can create multiple admin quarantines if you've got multiple schools or organizations. So we'll click, oh, we've got to call it a something. A lot of these settings, you've got to give a name before you can save it, and then you've got to click on save down at the bottom. So that is another way you can protect your users. If you've got any students who you don't want being able to email the entire world, so I'm just going to select the Students OU here. This is the one you want, restrict delivery. click on configure, and then I'm going to type into the internal only. So let's say you only want them to be able to email people in the school. You've got to add a list of domains that you want to allow. So we've got a list defined here already called securely, or I can create a new list. I'm going to create a list called Roger, because that's me. Okay, and then I'm going to edit that list, and then I can add domains or email addresses. So if you wanted them only to be able to email teachers and receive emails from teachers, you could put a list of teachers' email addresses in there. If you only wanted them to email within the domain, the school I actually teach at, for example, is called wheatleypark.org, and then they can only email people with wheatleypark.org email addresses. And you want to untick bypass this setting for internal messages, particularly if you want to sort of just allow them to email teachers. And you click on add that setting. I'm not going to add that one right there. There's a lot of other cool stuff you can do in here. We, for students, use objectionable content. So in here, we would tick these 4 boxes, and then we would modify the message and change the envelope recipient. And we would put in, I'm in the UK, so we have what's called heads of year. So there's a year group, and then there's somebody who oversees that year group, and we'd put the email address of the head of year in there. And we would have a list of objectionable words, which you can make here. So you can put in all of the naughty words that you don't want them to be able to use in emails. And we change the envelope recipient so it goes to the head of year, not the original recipient. We've done that prior to using things like Securely Auditor, which is much more sort of finely tuned to picking out sort of this person is unhappy and all that sort of stuff. This will just pick out the obvious things and send it straight to the head of year, and that's what we do anyways. A couple of other things in here to be aware of. There's this new thing, or relatively new thing, called MTA-STS. That's a higher level of email authentication, and I would recommend whoever looks after your domain turns that on, because that will give you additional protection from things like email spoofing. If you click on here, it tells you the records that you need to put into your back-end hosting, and there's a few other things that you have to do here. And it's a helpful link here, learn more, and it gives you a step-by-step set of instructions on how to set it up. It's not hard. I just read the instructions and did what I was told, and it works fine for us. Just read the instructions most of the time, works really, really well. And most of these things are linked to really good instructions. So that's a couple of things on mail really quickly. If I jump back into the admin console, if you want me to stop, please tell me.
No, Roger, I just want to mention that, like, I think that, you know, a lot of the things that you were just showing here is very, very important for us to ponder on, because I would say the vast majority of deployments that I would run through whenever I was implementing Auditor, you know, we would go through plenty of these settings, and I was surprised at how few schools implemented this, where students would be able to email whoever they wanted, or you know, there was no real true visibility. You know, when kids are on like Google Drive or email predominantly during the day, it's super important to have that visibility if you are going to allow it, which I think, Roger, like in your case, many of your schools, it's only the older grades, right? Like at what level generally are students able to email outside of the domain with you?
For ours, in the UK, it's secondary school, so that's 11 years old and older. So the primary schools are what in the US would be a kindergarten. We generally don't. They either don't have mail enabled at all, or as a service, it's just not there, or they're only allowed to email within a domain, or maybe just even their teachers. And I set it up per OU based on what that particular school wants. So you can be really granular with it, and it's really easy to do. Shall I show you a couple of other things as well?
Yeah. Let's go through a couple more inside your Google Admin Console.
Okay, so a couple of other things I would strongly recommend you do. There's this really useful thing called security here, and you've got settings. So if you go to settings and security, a couple of ones I would point out. This one here, less secure apps. This is disabled by default, and I would leave it disabled because that will prevent literally less secure apps from working. You might sometimes want to allow that for certain users. Things like photocopiers and things like that, and accounts you use there will need to have that allowed. But generally speaking, you want to have that turned off. Let's go back. Another thing that we push to our staff users is two-step verification, because this basically kills any sort of spoofing or account compromising dead. You just don't get it. There are so many people without two-factor authentication who are easy targets compared to those who have two-factor authentication, that if you enable it, then your security just goes through the roof. So if I was running this domain, I would go teachers there, on from, pick a date, like August the 29th or whenever, tell them it's happening, and then I would allow them to use any method other than text calls on phones, because that's the least secure. Text messages aren't encrypted and they're easy to intercept, so don't think SMS is in any way secure, because it isn't. If you want to go hardcore, you can go only security key. We do issue security keys to all of our staff. Something we buy, but it's well worth it. It saves a lot of grief from accounts that might get compromised or anything like that. So let's save that.
I would have to say, Roger, that is also, I think, a very, very important best practice for any sysadmin to enable on their domain, especially when it comes to staff accounts that almost always have much more access than student accounts.
Yep.
I know our webcams aren't showing right now for everybody, but I have my Google Titan key right next to me. I don't have the Google Advanced Protection set up, but I want to echo Roger's point that SMS is not foolproof, and we all know that kids, especially, are very savvy when it comes to like finding ways around filtering, trying to get around stuff. And if your teachers are like most employees, especially like in the corporate world, if you're not enforcing password, like strong password rules, like resetting or password management things where they have to change the password every so often, make it very difficult to be like, I've seen like passwords on sticky notes. And I've working on the support team at Securely, I know plenty of students that have found those passwords and have used those to authenticate as a teacher who might have more lax or like a more open internet experience. So just wanted to touch on that, because it's so easy to have implemented in Google, much more difficult to do in other platforms. So yeah, thanks for showing that, Roger. I'll let you
so from the distance learning point of view, if people are using private devices, then your control over those private devices is non-existent. And if they're putting their accounts on there, at least if they've got two-factor authentication and that device gets compromised, which I see with private accounts, private devices all of the time, then the account is pretty much safe because it's got 2FA on it. So yeah. A couple of other things, if I just go back in the security bit, if I go down to, it's moved to a different place, hasn't it? Let's forget that. It's still in security, but it's API controls. A little bit techy, this one. But you know, when you sign in, you get to that website and it's got a lovely Google sign-in button, and you click on that, and then you blindly ignore all the permissions it's giving, and when you just say, yeah, that's all right, then you're basically giving that company or that website sort of free rein on your particular device. So the way you can control that is by controlling API access, so preventing things from programmatically accessing your users' data. And this is a blank setup at the moment. So if I click on Manage Google Services, here we go. And at the moment, this would scare the EBGBs off me because it says unrestricted access, okay? And that just means that anybody can click on any Google login link and give access to their drive to any service they like. And you have absolutely no control over it whatsoever. So I would change access to restricted. And I would do that on all of these here. So now that's restricted. So if somebody tried to sign into something on this domain that wasn't a trusted Google service or something you'd explicitly allowed to access Drive and Mail or any of the others that you can do the same thing that I've just done, then they'd just be politely told this has been restricted and contact your administrator. So this stops all those nice Google login buttons that could be entirely malicious from stealing your data. And if you go on to apps here, there's a few that have been allowed. And as an admin, you can click on Configure New App, and you have to enter the OAuth app name. So when the user gets an error, hopefully they take a screenshot of it or copy and paste the text and send it to you. There's a little string of characters that you cut and paste in there if you want to allow access to that particular thing. And you can see securely is one that you would have to allow access to, which is already whitelisted there. So I would always work on the basis of whitelisting API access. I'd also work on the basis of whitelisting access to the Chrome Web Store as well for all users. So people can only install the things that you allow them to install. Otherwise, they can install any sort of garbage, which can cause all sorts of issues.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of other things I'd mention, if you just don't want all your data to disappear down a wormhole, if you go into Apps, G Suite, and then you got Drive and Docs here, and there's this thing called sharing settings. And you can see sharing options, sharing outside of Securely on. Files owned by Securely can be shared outside of Securely. So Securely at the moment on this domain can lose all their data if one person decides to share it with somebody else. So we can click on the little thing there and click on off. And I would have that off for any user who doesn't explicitly need to share stuff outside of the domain, which is most users, certainly all students and most staff do not need to share data outside of the domain. I click on that sharing button. You can whitelist other G Suite domains, so they can allow it to whitelisted domains.
Yeah, I would say that is an absolutely. I think that is probably one of the most important best practices that you've spoken to so far, Roger, because you are right. There's generally no reason why a student and honestly most staff members should be able to share certain docs outside of the organization. There's obviously certain scenarios, right? But there's so much like data privacy. So much personal information inside a school that data loss, it's a very important thing to be conscious of constantly. So two-factor auth, limiting access and building like these walled gardens and like Drive, email, etc. if you haven't set these settings up, you should most definitely look into it for this fall, because all these devices are outside of your class, outside of your school. So thanks for showing those, Roger. I wanted to see if I can share my screen and go over a couple of.
Okay, I'll stop sharing and.
We're going to cross our fingers, and if it doesn't work this time, then I might pass it back over to you. But let me hit this.
That's all right.
Yeah, it looks like it'll help me, or it'll work this time. Okay, so we'll give it a second and load for everybody. And here in a moment, you should be seeing my Google Admin Console, and there's a slight delay. Cool. All right, should be loading. So in line with sort of like what Roger was showing, the other big things you can do when it comes to like apps, extensions, is manage what can and can't be installed, right? So Google's moved a lot. So if you haven't been in the Google Admin Console in a while, some of these settings used to be in different places. And I've even had to go through here myself and like click around and see where one goes to manage many of these features, because previously managing apps and extensions used to be inside of user settings for Chrome devices. Now it has its own section in place inside the Google Admin Console. But at the OU level, so if you were to in this case want to manage how your staff and faculty we're able to install apps and extensions, you can manage that right up here at the very top. You can decide whether or not they should be able to allow and install any app, Grammarly, LastPass, but also you can download Tor browsers and ways to get around filtering. So we always recommend, especially for your student OUs, you block all apps and extensions, except for the ones that you explicitly allow. Oh, and I'm not signed in. Except for the ones that you explicitly allow. It's one of our best practices that we recommend for whenever you go to deploy our filter solution. But yeah, certainly take a look at what you have set up for your student OUs, because if you haven't done like a audit in quite some time, it's probably worth looking in there, because summertime when you're making brand new OUs, you're moving users around, so it's possible some of those settings don't necessarily move over. The other things that I like to go through depend on like if I'm looking at some of the device level settings, and again this can be done at the like an OU level, so you might want to treat staff members differently than students, but for the most part, a lot of the things that we're going to be showing are good best practices for all, right? The first one is actually at the very top, which is forced re-enrollment. Making sure that these devices, if a student were to power wash that device, re-enrolls, because this ensures that all the settings that you configure at the user level, for example, get applied, and a kid or staff member can't get around what you as a school have defined as what they should receive. I also like that Google's added this nice search feature inside of here, because it makes finding all the new settings that they've added very easy. One of the recommendations that I have, again at the device level, is disabling guest mode. Guest mode and like certain kiosks, it's difficult to push down like settings, and in our case, our extension. So we recommend disabling the guest mode, incognito, like I was mentioning before. If you spell it correctly, it's I believe it's in the device level, but disabling incognito. Now, the other settings I like to highlight are user settings, where students I've found have tried to get around filtering most often is when schools have opened up and allowed things like access to developer tools. Um, there's certainly cases where certain staff, certainly admins, need to have access to developer tools so that you can, inspect and figure out why a site might be broken. But there's generally no reason why a student should have access to developer tools, unless they're maybe in like a class, right? But recommending blocking that. And then also in line with that, Task Manager. Task Manager allows the end user to end processes, and that means being able to end processes that certain extensions, might require to run successfully. So if you're running, a classroom management tool or a content filter, you definitely want to make sure that students aren't allowed to end those processes. Very, very important. And then no matter what content filter you end up using, Google makes it very easy for you to enforce a lot of safe browsing at the browser level. So being able to ensure that students are always receiving, say, like, Google Safe Search. You can enforce that at the OU level. And then also for YouTube, in enforcing what level of YouTube restriction you can do this directly on the OU level. Strict is the absolute most restricted mode, which is good for most students, but high schoolers and others might not need that level of restriction. So you can apply those here. We have a great knowledge base article on managing YouTube on our support site. If this is something that you currently struggle with, certainly let us know, because we've been there, and there's a lot. There's so many places you can manage YouTube. So with that, I wanted to quickly show what our UI, what, for example, Roger and others see when they're using Securely's platform. Inside of here, it's very easy to understand, at a glance, what your students are doing, and we do this and break it down by policy, but understanding where students are being flagged, the breakdown of like how policies are being applied, at what time of day, flagged activities are occurring. We're making it very easy for you as an admin, or if you're a guidance counselor and teacher, to understand, at a glance, what's going on with your students. Again, we're entirely cloud-based, so even if you aren't at your school right now, you could deploy Securely from a forced installed extension right now, have Securely filtering your users off-site in literally minutes, and have this insight be able to look at all the activities, what students are being flagged by, breaking it down. It's real time, extremely fast. And again, there's nothing that you have to have at your school, but you're able to enforce different policies. Policies look like this, essentially allowing you to also enforce things like Safe Search. So if you're not necessarily a Google school, say you're Azure, you can enforce a lot of these settings regardless of what cloud identity provider you use. I know many of you are Google, but not everybody is. But we make it very easy to apply this. These policies you can map at the OU level, but selecting categories, which you want to allow and deny, we make very easy. And then we also make it very easy to get staff involved and giving them access to different alerts. So all those alerts, like Roger was speaking about with Auditor, where they're making different school and building level leaders aware of when things are blocked or when there's flagged alerts. You can configure that and make it very easy where they can see all those flagged alerts using our AI for Google services like Gmail, Docs, Drive, and only for students that they're responsible for. So when you go and you build these staff groups, it's very easy to essentially just map it to the OUs that they're responsible for. I know one thing that Roger does really well is getting parents involved. and he actually even has his student information system set such that it's automatically syncing all of his parents and student mappings to Securely. Roger, you're using our secure FTP, aren't you?
Yes, I am. So I've got it set. In the UK, the most common information system is called SIMS, but you could probably do this with any. I run a report, an automated report every day that pulls off the data that Securely needs, which is basically the G Suite username of the student, first name, surname, and the email address of a guardian and their first name, surname, I believe. So it just exports that into a network share on a server that's at school. And then I have a script that tidies it up a little bit, and then I just use a scheduled SFTP upload to upload it. So it runs automatically with zero assistance from me. And because we've got multiple schools, what I do is get them to sync their data into a Google Sheet, and then I have a little bit of Google Sheet script that turns that into a CSV file, which then syncs down to that server. And I have another script that adds all the CSV files together, which then uploads to Securely. So basically, you can kind of, not with that much effort, automate the entire thing. And it's something that I never touch nowadays, really. It's in my blog how to do it. So
Yep.
you go onto my blog and search Securely. It's one of the things that will come up.
Yeah. And, I want to mention, I did show, it's available as an Android app, iOS app, but this is where you as a school can decide and define, what level of control your parents have. You can decide what level of reporting parents can see, and when school is happening again on-prem for everybody, you can decide if parents only see what happens at home, everything, or even like a mix of everything at home, but during the school day, only want to show them educational. I don't want them to see when their kid went to bestbuy.com or what have you. But being able to empower parents, I think, is one of those differentiators between us and a lot of our other solutions that are out there, because this is very unique. Real-time access to basically say what should and shouldn't be allowed. That parent can work in hand with that teacher very easily through here. And I did have this up, but I didn't have a chance to show it just yet, our teacher tools. So what we build and give teachers. We directly integrate with Google Classroom. And even if classes are happening entirely remote, that teacher can very easily say, I want this class to happen and be all day from 8 to 3. And that teacher can essentially start the class and see what all of his or her students are doing, even if they aren't directly right in front of each other. And if there's a kid that's not on task, say that teacher is running a Zoom meeting and speaking to a lecture or what have you, that teacher can go through here, select that specific student, control and manage all the tabs that are open, essentially delete or close whatever tabs that they shouldn't be on. They can even go as far as send an announcement and say, we're about to start the next lesson or what have you, and send it to everybody. As far as even run and start a direct one-on-one chat. That goes directly to that student. All of these students can also raise hands and initiate chat directly with that teacher as well too. So if that student is lost or needs help, even if they aren't in that same classroom together, they're able to still engage, which I love. I think that this has been very helpful. The other thing that I've noticed that many schools and teachers are starting to use is at the end of the class period, we run reports for how users and students are staying engaged. Many teachers are using that to kind of also track attendance, to keep in the know for like what students are popping in during the day. So there's a lot of really cool things you can do with our teacher tools. And if you actually want to try it out, you can try it for free. There's a link right below. Actually, let me go ahead and stop sharing. Yeah, if you want to check it out and test it yourself, made it super easy. And we'd love for you to play around, because if you don't have these tools, they work perfectly with Google, and they help empower teachers, but then also parents. So, Roger, was there any closing thoughts or things that like you would like to add, or things that you feel like this audience might enjoy to hear?
There's a couple of things. I think just to reiterate, the security tools are really cool, and I was speaking to one of the head teachers at one of our primary schools who have just literally, they've got securely filtering up and running this morning on site, and showing her how I've delegated access to her school so she can be big brother for the entire school and get the alerts and things. She seemed to think that was amazing and wonderful compared to what they previously had, which was a bit rubbish. So yeah, no, that's really good. There's a couple of slightly softer rather than hardcore security type things I can just flag up on the admin console if you'd like me to, for a minute or two, that sort of make things easier for people, not necessarily having anything to do directly with security. Well, I haven't heard enough. I'll do this. If I just share my screen just for a second. Let's see
give it a shot.
Just this works. Is it going to share my screen?
I think there's a short lag, and while we're waiting for your screen to share, Tim and Lori asked a question, because they're also securely customers. The interface that I was showing off of our UI is brand new and is going live for everybody this month, this August. We already have, I think, a few hundred schools using our new UI, but all of our products are going into a single user interface. So we're really excited about that. But I figured I'd like to show that off with all the cool new dashboard analytics, because I'm really proud and excited for it. So Tim, Lori, I'll reach out to you guys after this webinar. Maybe I can turn it on early for you. But yeah, Roger, I'll let you have it.
Okay, so if I just jump into Chrome user settings, one of the battles you have when we take over a school is that people have what I'd call a vanilla device experience. So they crack up Chrome and that's it, and there's nothing there. So we kind of help them along with that a little bit. So there's some fluffy settings which I'd say in here. We don't have anything to do with security, just make it nicer. So if I just type start there, we always put something in here called page to load on startup. So when they fire up Chrome, they don't just get the blank Chrome thing. So our pupils would get this pupil portal, which is made in Google Sites, which gives them easy access to cloud. No matter where they are, as long as they're signed in with their school account, they get that. And that just makes life so much easier for your end users. So if you haven't done that, I'd recommend doing that. The other one is, I just type book, manage bookmarks. So you can push bookmarks to your users, which makes life, and you can do this by OU. So you have different student bookmarks, different staff bookmarks, and even IT support bookmarks. So I get IT support bookmarks. So I get things like Freshdesk and O365 login and Intune and all this sort of stuff. These are bookmarks that get pushed to members of IT support, as opposed to the ones that get pushed to, and you can call it whatever you like. So you just create an environment for your users, which is really sort of points them in the right direction, really. I'd also use the policy bookmark bar. I always enable the bookmark bar so they see those bookmarks. Otherwise, they don't see the bookmarks unless some of them don't even know there's a bookmark bar exists as a thing, and you can just drag things onto it as bookmarks. So that's just usability stuff, really, which I often just don't see when I go to schools. And people think, whoa, that looks really cool now. And the other thing I'd just point out is this isn't just about Chromebooks. Now, if I go to devices and I go to settings, and you'll see that this thing called Windows settings now. So if you've got take-home devices which are Chromebooks are dead easy to manage, and you can nice, secure lockdown experience. You can do exactly the same thing with Windows devices without having to touch Active Directory, Azure AD, Intune, any of those things. So we now manage a lot of our Windows devices using Windows MDM, which you can basically just turn on here, and then you've got a load of settings and all your custom settings going here. That requires some G Suite for Enterprise licenses. It doesn't need one for every user, but it does need some. But if you compare the cost compared to other management platforms, it's actually really competitive. And it puts the device management, for me, all in one place, which makes my life so much easier. And I do have a blog post all about how to use and the policy settings for Google MDM, including pushing securely Smart Pack. So Windows users get content filtering off-site as well, and how to stop them overriding that content filtering. Anyways, that's just a couple of things that people might be sort of interested in.
I love it. Roger, we had one question come in from Virginia. She asked if students already created their own bookmarks, such as for Google Classroom, when you force the bookmarks down like you just showed, will they have two? Will it overwrite? Like, what's the expected behavior?
No, it doesn't do anything like that. You just get this folder. All you have control of in terms of bookmarks is the folder that I showed you in the top left-hand corner, which you can call whatever you want. It'll just appear, and then all of their bookmarks will still be there.
Oh, excellent. That's cool. Well, we didn't have any other questions come through. I know we're slightly over on time, so I apologize about that. But I did want to mention one more time that this webinar has been recorded. You'll get a link probably in about 30 minutes or so. But the same link you use to get inside here is the same one that you can use to share out or watch this again. Roger, I want to thank you so much for your expertise. Everybody that's on here should certainly check out his blog, bookmark it. You can click on the little bio button here at the very bottom and add us on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and all that. And it looks like Hope did ask one more question. This will be the last one before I promise I'll let everybody go. Hope was wondering if you can also set the home page. I'll let you speak to that, Roger.
Yeah, there is a policy for setting the home page as well.
And that's in the user settings, correct?
It is. It's in user settings. The key thing about those policies, those user settings, if you're on a Chromebook, they automatically apply because you're signing in with that account. If you're on another device, then the user has to have sync turned on. So they actively have to turn on sync, otherwise those policies will not apply. And if you're on a Windows AD manage local Active Directory, there are Chrome policies which you can apply, which force users to sign in. There's also a Chrome user policy now, which is rather cool. That means that user has to turn on sync. It's not an optional thing, which is useful on other platforms. And if you're using things like Google MDM, then that's single sign-on. So you sign into the PC with your G Suite account, and then you're automatically signed in to the Chrome browser. So the policies then follow on.
I think that's the fun stuff. That's the things that I like to get into is I like getting into the nitty gritty on group policies in the Windows environment, MDM, pushing those things down and enforcing everybody to use the Chrome browser, because at the end of the day, if you can ensure everybody's using the Chrome browser and in your environment, regardless of device, it makes management just so incredibly easy, as you just saw here. So, Hope, I'm glad that answered your question.
On Windows, when we set them up, we remove Internet Explorer as a feature, so it's just not there. And Edge, we hide all the bookmarks, so it's really hard to find it. You can't actually get rid of it. But you can make it very hard for users to find and pin Chrome to the taskbar and the start menu and all that sort of stuff, so that they don't really get a choice.
Oh, that's too good. Well, I promise I'll let everybody go. Again, thank you, Roger, for being our speaker today, sharing that. Reach out to us if you have any other questions. Again, all of our contact information is in the bio. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your year. Have a great back to school, and we'll see you soon, hopefully. Bye, everybody.
Bye.